Welcome to Fix It Finance. Good morning, everybody. If Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a good one. Today we are discussing whether to invest or pay off debt. I'm just gonna go live on Instagram and then we will get rocking. Um, Okay, there we go. We are live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you're new here, welcome. It's nice, it's lovely to have you. If you are an oldie slash, you know, fan, thank you so much for joining. Thank you to every single one of you that logs in live, watches this after it has aired, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much. As usual, if you have questions, comments, or the like, please leave it in the comment section. So I'm checking comments on Facebook, sorry, on YouTube and Instagram only, just because. Okay, so today we're talking about whether to invest or, save, whether to invest or pay off debt. So let's get right into it. So today's segment is broken into a couple of parts. So first thing we're going to talk about, just what it is to invest or pay off debt. Then we're going to talk about what you must do before you even decide to do either or. And then we'll talk about, if you decide to pay off debt first, these are the pros and cons. If you decide to invest first, these are the pros and cons. And if you decide to do both, these are some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks. And then we'll look at some graphs, kind of like we did last week, just to kind of show what your budget can look like or would look like when you decide to pay off debt. And then, of course, last but not least, I will share what my recommendation is for, again, general public. Each person's situation is different. So make sure as much as possible. The whole point of Fix It Finance, what we try to do here, not what we try, what we are doing here, the biggest thing I'm trying to do for each and every one of you is to let you know what your options are. Because a lot of times people are making financial decisions not knowing what their options are, not knowing there's more out there. You understand? So, for example, I was talking to someone today who wanted to do something. And then because I've done it before, I mentioned, some of the drawbacks and some of the benefits, and they were not aware of any of the drawbacks. All they knew were the benefits. You understand? And of course, in hearing the drawbacks, they made a choice to actually do more research and just try and decide if that's what's best for them. Okay. So here at Fix It Finance, I let you know what your options are. If you want to buy a house, these are all the things you need to look at. These are all the questions you need to ask. These are all the options you potentially have. If you want to do A, if you want to do B, make sure you look at this side of the coin, that side of the coin, and then make your decision. Do what's best for you and your family. So when it comes to all things personal finance, I always say personal finance is number one, personal. So there's no right or wrong. What's right for one person can be wrong for another. What's wrong for one person can be wrong for another. Okay, that's why as much as possible, I don't just share my experiences. I share the different options that are out there and why and how we chose, A, B, or C, X, Y, or Z as our option. Okay, so today, like I mentioned, we're talking about, whether to invest or pay off debt. If you're new here, I go live every Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So join us. As much as possible, I let you know if I'm not going to go live. But, for the most part, I think I've only had like 2 or 3 that I missed, I think. Anyways, thank you again for joining to everyone. Okay, so let's get right into it. To invest or pay off debt. So the very first thing I wanted to start off is to say that, you know, it's completely up to you, like I mentioned, to decide what's best for you and your family. Okay. Whichever path you choose, you get an A plus for even doing something compared to the rest of the population that has no financial plan. Okay. And just wishing everything would work out. If in fact you even have a the wherewithal, let me use grammar for you people today, like you're even deciding, okay, should I invest or should I, that means you're somebody that's even paying attention. You understand what your finances are doing, you understand, and you're actually taking action to do something about your financial life, which again, you get an A plus for doing that, because there are a lot of people out here just wishing everything would work out and burying their heads in the sand and being in denial. So if you're a person that has actually come to this crossroads, should I pay off debt, should I invest, well done. Okay. So, like I mentioned, it is and will always be a personal decision. Don't let anyone make you feel, make you do something you don't want to do, and don't let anyone make you feel stupid or unrefined. You understand, for choosing one or the other. Whichever path you choose, you are not a silly person. Whether you invest first or you pay off debt first, the fact is you're making progress. Okay. So Another thing before we go into, the meat of the matter is whichever one you decide to do, whether to invest first or to what do you call it, pay off debt first, always make sure you have an emergency fund. Okay, so that one is part of your foundation, you understand? So before you start building the house, there are some things that must be in the foundation. Things like keeping track of your expenses, knowing, you understand, what your expenses are, knowing what your free cash flow is, knowing having an emergency fund. Those are basic, that's primary nursery school safe. So you make sure you have an emergency fund before you decide whether to invest or um pay off debt. Now, what should the emergency fund to be? We've treated that in another video. I will definitely treat it again in a different video. But having an emergency fund is basically having some sort of fund available for when life happens. Okay, because emergencies happen. Your tire goes out while you're driving on the highway. Your mom calls from a different country, someone is very sick and you have to send money. Your child, god forbid, something happens or even has to go. For example, your child has a project or a class trip that's coming up they didn't tell you about on time. There's so many things. Life comes at you in different ways, you understand? So always have an emergency fund so it doesn't derail your investing or your debt payoff. Again, whichever one you decide to do, the other thing you want to make sure you do is to take the match at work. Okay, so if you get a match at your office, whether you're paying off debt or investing, always take the match. And this is because your match is part of your compensation. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Canada, that 3%, 6%, or whatever percentage your company matches you either in a TFSA, RRSP, or pension is part of your compensation. Not taking it is like leaving part of your paycheck on the table. Okay, so whatever you do, take the match. When we were paying off debt, I took the match throughout and we still paid off our debt in less than 2 years. Okay, so make sure you take the match whatever happens. Okay, um so like both of them, whether you choose to invest first or pay off debt first, or do both would require discipline, sticking to your plan, and avoiding lifestyle creep. So what is lifestyle creep? Lifestyle creep is where the cost of maintaining your lifestyle slowly increases and eats up your free cash flow. You understand? So you want to make sure you are monitoring your cash flow. I say this here and I'm saying it again. Always, 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 always guard your cash flow, like literal GUARD, guard it. Like make sure you are monitoring any enemy of progress that wants to take your cash flow, delete them by fire. Okay. um the other thing, okay, so based on math, okay, it makes more sense to invest first. Okay. And that's just based on general knowledge. But based on math as well, it can also make more sense to pay off debt first. Okay. Each person's scenario is so different. You understand? And each person's factors are unique to them. So each family, each person, your factors are unique to you. So based on math that I calculate for one client, it can make more sense to invest first. Based on math that I calculate for another family, it can make more sense to pay off debt first. Okay. So each one is so unique, so you must know your numbers. Okay, then based on psychology, so like when it comes to whether to invest or pay off debt first, the tug of war, the struggle is usually between psychology and math. You understand? So it's usually between, okay, the peace of mind slash whatnot that comes from paying off debt or having money in the bank or money in a retirement account or whatever that looks like, versus what the math is actually saying. Okay, so we've talked about the math side. The math can favor either or. Based on psychology as well, it seems like, there's more relief received when you pay off debt, because I'm yet to find anybody that regrets paying off their debts to a large extent. Okay, but also based on psychology, it can make more sense to have, a big pile of money saved over here. That's a source of peace and security for some people. Okay, so math and psychology don't necessarily favor either or, because in each case and depending on each person, you understand, math, may favor out psychology or vice versa. For example, if you're someone that grew up, say you grew up very poor, like, even below the poverty line, having a big pile of cash is something you might love. You just want to know, okay, there's savings, leave the debt. You just want to know that, okay, there's $100,000 just sitting down there chilling. You understand? And vice versa. For example, let's say you're somebody that grew up, you saw your parents struggle to make ends meet because they were so much in debt. For you, it might be that the psychology is you don't want to owe anybody anymore. You understand? Or you don't want your children to see you go through the same thing that your parents went through. So again, like I mentioned, it's completely personal. There's no right or wrong. If you find yourself trying to make this decision of whether to invest or pay off debt, you are in the A plus category. Okay. By the way, our source of peace and security should be God, but stay with me. Okay, so before deciding which one to pay, which one you must, which one to do first, okay, you must first and foremost find some free cash flow. If you make 10,000 a month and you spend 10,000 a month, you are not this is not a topic of discussion for you, because you are not, you don't have any free cash flow to either pay off debt or invest. You understand? Because you're spending everything that you're making. So first things first, you must have, in order to even answer this question in the first place, is you must have free cash flow. And if you are someone that has free cash flow or has found a way to find free cash flow in your budget, congratulations, you are definitely again in the A plus category. Okay, because most people spend everything they make, right? That's just the way our system is designed. you know everything goes out in the form of payments, in the form of entertainment, in the form of spending on luxury, in the form of experience, in the form of this, that, and the other thing is a necessity. You understand? So by eliminating all your necessities, finding ways to comb through your budget, comb through your expenses and see, where am I wasting money, where are all the leakages, blocking all those leakages. Those are some of the ways you can find free cash flow, like ASAP. Okay, if there is no free cash flow, like I said, there's nothing to talk about. You are not a candidate for this discussion, but you can be a candidate for this discussion by actually finding free cash flow. Okay, finding free cash flow, you can find free cash flow by keeping track of your expenses and adjusting accordingly. So one of the things I notice is some people, they like, as when I encourage them to keep track of their expenses, you understand, they do that and then they get stuck, in the sense of they keep track but they don't make any adjustments. The whole point of keeping track of your expenses is to be able to find those holes where money is leaking and plug up those holes. You understand? For example, you're paying for a gym membership you barely use. You understand? It might be time to cancel it and start doing videos online. You understand? Again, temporarily. For example, you're paying for experiences you barely use, or you're paying for things you don't necessarily enjoy anymore, but you're just so used to paying for it. You understand? Those are some of the things. When you track your expenses, you identify those, because it's all data. You're gathering data, and then you're supposed to use that data to make informed decisions. Okay, so like I have this point here. I say lots of folks keep track but get stuck and don't adjust. As you keep track of your expenses, as you budget, adjust accordingly. Okay, the I already said this, that the whole point of keeping track of your expenses is to gather data on where your money is going, so you can redirect it from any areas where it is being wasted or misused. Okay, so that's the whole point. You identify the areas where your money is being wasted or misused, and you redirect it into investing or paying off debt or the like. So free cash flow, free cash flow, free cash flow. Say it with me: free cash flow. If you don't have free cash flow, we're not talking about anything. Okay, so do your best to eliminate payments, cancel what you're not using, what you're barely using, and you must have free cash flow. Okay, so now let's talk about, if you decide to pay off debt first, what does that look like? So first of all, let's define what debt is in this context. Debt includes all non-mortgage consumer debt. So things like your line of credit, credit card, student loan, personal loans, car loan, money you owe to your uncle. You understand? Those are all what I mean by debt. So I'm talking about non-mortgage debt. So when you look at the case of a HELOC, for example, a home equity line of credit, 9 out of 10 times, depending on the scenario, a HELOC is usually considered mortgage debt. It's a second mortgage. It's just a fancy word for second mortgage. You understand? Your first mortgage is the one on your house. Then your second mortgage is the one you use to borrow out the equity from that same house. Both of them go on, the title. You understand? So they have every access to your house, but that's not what we're talking about. So, a HELOC is considered mortgage debt, but sometimes, depending on the amount and what it was used for, it might actually fit in the consumer debt category. So, say for example, you were somebody who, you had equity in your house of say 100,000. You had debt on one hand of 50,000. You decided to pull out 50,000 to pay off that debt. That 50,000 is technically consumer debt, because you basically just move the debt around. Okay, so in this context, it will be part of paying debt off first, not the other one of mortgage. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for those who, so we understand what we mean by debt as we go forward. So if you decide to pay off debt first, it requires diligence and discipline to ensure you follow through on what you have decided. Okay, there's no plan here, whether you're investing or paying off debt, that will not require the discipline and diligence to follow through. okay? Because you can do step one and find all this free cash flow. Let's say you comb through your budget, you free up $600 worth of cash. Then guess what? You go out tomorrow and you decide, you know what, I'm going to start spending extra 600 a month. You upgrade your apartment, or you upgrade your car, or you upgrade your phone, or you upgrade your lifestyle in one particular category. All of a sudden, you're getting a facial every week. Again, nothing wrong with spending. It's just if you don't follow through, then there's no point. Okay, so make sure you follow through whatever you decide. Okay, whether it's paying off debt first, investing first, or doing both, make sure as you find that free cash flow, you follow through. Okay, the free cash flow in your budget, okay, is used to attack all debt and pay it off. So now let's say we found $600 in step one. Okay, we've combed through everything, we've canceled a few payments, we've stopped one or two activities that we usually or we barely do, we've canceled one or two things. Now we found free cash flow in our budget. So that free cash flow is used to attack all your debts and pay it off. So for example, if you use the debt snowball method or the debt avalanche method, we've talked about this in the previous video, I'll talk about it again down the road. But whatever method you choose, you would take that free cash flow and attack all your debts one by one. So say you have 5 debts, you understand? You would take the smallest one, list it out, then you take 600, throw it on the smallest one until it's paid off. Then take the payment from the first one plus the 600, throw it on the second one. Then do that until you finish paying off the debt. If you're doing the avalanche method, whichever one has the highest interest rate is the one you pay off first. Okay, so you take the 600 plus whatever minimum payment is on that particular item. You pay it off, or you keep paying at it until you pay that off. Then you take that payment plus the 600 and you pay it on the next one with the highest interest rate. Okay, so that's how you do that. As much as possible, if you're choosing to pay off debt first, I would recommend that you have a plan to have the debt paid off in 3 years or less. The reason is you don't want to drag out the process, in the sense of you don't want to be saying you're paying off debt for the next 12 years. That's not focused. That's not what we're talking about. In that scenario, you're better off doing both. Okay. What you want to do is, the whole point is to have, focus, the power of focus. You take everything that you potentially have in your budget and you use it to attack the debt if you're focusing on debt first, or you use it to invest if you're focusing on investing first. Okay, so you don't want to drag it. So when it comes to debt payment, if your debt is going to take you longer than 3 years to pay, then it might be a case, for example, for looking at doing both, you understand, as opposed to just focusing on one. So what you can do is, for the first 3 years, pay off as much as you possibly can. Then at the end of year three, switch to doing both if you still have debt left over. You understand? That's just one school of thought there. Okay, so on average, it usually takes people about 2 years or less, just based on studies, based on things that have been done. When people decide to pay off their debt, a lot of times the momentum you gain, you understand, and then the discipline that you gain, because what happens is it almost becomes like a game. I think we've said this in previous videos. By the time you start paying off the debt and you're seeing that progress, everybody now gets gingered, everybody gets excited, and it now becomes, even the entire household, the kids, everybody gets involved with selling stuff, raising money and whatnot, trying to pay off this particular debt, because we said, okay, we want to pay off this debt in 3 years, and before you know it, in say 20 months you get it paid off, in 18 months you get it paid off. You understand? Because what happens is, a lot of times people end up upgrading jobs. For example, they might reskill, upskill, and before you know it, they monetize a particular skill because they're trying to raise money to pay off debt. So you end up seeing opportunities around you, and you see things around you did not see before, again because you've decided to focus. Okay, so paying off your debt is the quickest way to repossess your cash flow. So like I mentioned, if you have your paycheck and co going out in the form of payments, paying off your debt is one very quick way to repossess your cash flow. Because once you've paid off, let's say you've paid off a line of credit that's currently taking $300 from your budget each month, guess what? That $300 is now free for you to do something with in the future. Okay, like invest, for example. Okay, paying off your debt affects your credit score positively. Okay, again, depending on context. So as you pay things off, because your credit utilization improves and whatnot, paying off your debt affects your credit score positively 9 out of 10 times. When it comes to paying off debt, there's lots of saving. There's also lots of saving on money you would have otherwise paid in interest. So, for example, if you look at what you're paying off, you understand, because a lot of times people just look at the payment and say, "Oh, okay, good, I can afford the $500 a month." But when you look at it, you might see that maybe 350 is going towards interest. and only 200 or how much? Yeah, 350, 500. Anyways, I'm not, this is not math, but out of say $500, you have 350 going towards interest, and you only have 150 going towards paying off the actual debt. Okay, so in that scenario, every month you are literally dashing somebody else $350. Okay, so when you pay off debt, there's a lot of savings that come from money that would have otherwise gone into interest. For example, if you have a line of credit, usually they might say the minimum payment is, say 2% of the balance, or however much percent of the balance, or $200, whichever one is higher. Okay, so let's say you're paying your $200 off each month, you're paying the 200, the minimum payment. You look up and notice of the 200, 186 is interest. You understand? And you have less than $15 going towards the principal. You're not going to pay that debt off. It's not a cost. You understand? It's going to take you literally the entire rest of your life to pay it off. So you understand? So that's what I mean by paying attention. And when you decide to pay off debt, you understand, it frees up money that would have otherwise gone to interest. Okay, and that's why a lot of people tend to feel much richer when they pay off debt, because they're like, oh wow, you understand? Because now, before, you had, in the 500 example, you had 350 going to somebody else and 250 going towards your principal, so you were not seeing the effect of that 500. But now, all of a sudden, when you don't have that payment, the 350 plus the 250 is coming into your bank account. So you're just like, oh wow, that's interesting. You understand? So it changes, there's a lot of savings that comes from money that would have otherwise gone into interest that you were not even paying attention to before. Okay, so for example, like I mentioned, let's say you have a car payment that's supposed to be 8 years, you pay off the car in 3 years, you saved literally 5 years worth of interest. And if you calculate what that amounts to, it could be upwards of $20,000, okay, that you would have otherwise paid out. Okay. So I have some points here about, imagining if you had no payments and your paycheck that gets deposited was yours to keep. Even if you make $1,000 a month, imagine if that whole $1,000 was yours to keep. Okay, you make 6,000 a month, you make 7,000, you make 10,000 a month. Imagine if a good chunk of that 6, 7, or 10,000 was yours to keep. Okay, what would you do differently, and what sort of decisions would you make if there were no payments in your life? So that's one of the things to consider if you decide to pay off debt first. Okay, then once all the debts are paid off, it's not just for you to sit down. Okay, the money that would have otherwise gone out in debt payments, okay, would then be used to invest, upgrade your lifestyle. For example, one of the things people do in order to quickly pay off the debt in 3 years or less is to sacrifice on lifestyle. So things like, some people might change from, let's say you're paying 2,500 in rent, they might switch to a smaller apartment that's say 1,500 to free up that $1,000 to throw towards debt. When you're done paying off debt, you can now decide to switch back to an apartment that costs say $2,500. You understand? The extra amounts that you make, that you have now, the free cash flow you have because you don't have any other payments, you can now have enough money to say put towards investing, put towards paying off your mortgage, put towards being more generous in general. Okay, so the whole point is you sacrifice for a temporary season, which is the 3 years or less, like we're talking about, and then you switch over and start doing the other. Okay, so let's look at uh um oh, I see a comment here from Michael. Thank you so much, Michael. You're always giving me comments. I love it so much. I appreciate. It says, I'll do debt payment first. Like you said, credit score improves, yes. Plus more debt, interest rates are probably double the interest rates on investment. Yes, that's another thing. We talk about that in the investment section, which is what I'm switching to right now. So let's talk about if you decide to invest first. Okay, so investing includes things like emergency savings. So saving and investing, I'm going to use those words interchangeably in this section. So when I mean saving, what I mean is the money you are saving, you're putting it towards things like emergency fund, retirement saving for your children's future, things like that. So that's what we mean by investing in this scenario. Okay, so saving for uh uh security and saving for the future. Okay, like I mentioned, whether you're doing debt or you're doing investing, it requires diligence and discipline to ensure you follow through on what you have decided. If you are going to free up your cash flow and not follow through, just go and blow the money. Okay, go and spend it. Go to, I don't know where you want to go to, spend it and live your life. But if you're going to follow through, thank you for joining us. You are here. What I mean is, make sure you follow through, because the way our system and our society is designed, you're going to find free cash flow, and the next thing is it's going to start blowing with the wind. Okay, if you don't direct it and give it purpose and an assignment. Okay, consider your money your staff and you are sending them on errand on different assignments. Okay, so make sure you follow through. If you choose to invest, you take advantage of compound interest for longer, which usually means better returns. Okay, so if you decide to invest, let's say someone, you take person A, take person B, the person that started 3 years earlier, chances are their returns might be higher. You understand? Again, chances their returns might be higher than the person that say started 3 years later. However, the person that starts 3 years later, if they indeed finish and free up that cash flow, they can usually make up for that lost time by adding more to the investment. So, say for example, person A decides they want to do both. They're going to put 1,000 towards investing, 1,000 towards debt. Person B decides I'm going to put the full 2,000 towards debt repayments. Okay. And then after I finish paying off my debt in 3 years, and then now I can put 2,000 towards investing. So the way they make up for lost time, or the way they redeem time, is the fact that this person now has $2,000 to put towards investing versus the person that's still putting 1,000. You understand? So over time, this person makes up for the time because they have more to put towards investing. Okay, so that's one thing to think about. Um, it improves your credit worthiness. You understand? So we've talked about credit worthiness in a previous video. Down the road, I'll still talk about it again, because lenders see that you have assets that can be liquidated to pay back. So for example, if you are someone that wants to keep borrowing in the future, you understand, you might see that having a big pile of cash, or having a nicely funded RRSP, TFSA, RESP, blah blah blah, lenders can look at that and say, okay, this person has money that such that if they want to borrow X amount, I know they have enough to be able to liquidate and pay back. Okay, so it improves your credit worthiness, not necessarily your credit score, but it improves your credit worthiness. Okay, when we talked about credit worthiness, we talked about the whole picture that lenders and co look at. Okay, um depending on interest rates on your debt, you might not be making any progress if you choose to invest. So which is kind of what Michael alluded to earlier. So that's why I said I was going to get to that point. For example, if you have credit card debt that's charging you 20% over here, okay, on average the stock market returns 10%, but if you remove inflation, it's about 7%. Net those two, you are losing 13% by you're still losing 13% if you choose to invest versus paying off that credit card. Okay, so on a math perspective, it does not work in that scenario. But on a psychological perspective, you having that savings or investment might be more peace to you than having the credit card debt on this side. So you have to decide what works for you. Okay, it's not all math, it's personal, like I mentioned a few times in when we started this. um there's peace and security of knowing you have enough saved for a rainy day and for the future. Okay, so for example, you have a fully funded emergency fund. You're starting to maximize your retirement account and whatnot. For some folks, that's the kind of security and peace that they like, even though they have debt on one side. So long as they're making their minimum payments, they don't really care. They want to pile up savings. Okay, there are also people that are strategic in the sense of, again, you cannot time the market, so please take this with a grain of salt. For example, let's say there's a market crash, they pile in a whole bunch of money into the market at that point. Then as the market rises up again, they take it out and use it to pay off debt again, because the net in that scenario, say the math works out, okay, such that they put in their money when things are really low and they're able to make upwards of however much percent. But you have to be making, in this scenario of the credit card versus the investment, literally your stock market return will have to be at least 23%, okay, per year, in order to be able to cover the credit card debt on this side. Okay, so and there are people that do it, so it's not impossible. So just again, know what works for you. I have here as a caveat, be mindful of insurance products posing as investments. What you want to do is to invest directly through a brokerage, in registered accounts and whatnot. Be very mindful, because one of the ways insurance providers try and take advantage of people, in my opinion, is they say, okay, you are not investing, come and buy this insurance product, it has investment inside. Meanwhile, they're selling you nonsense. So anyways, that's for a story for another day. Okay, I see a comment here from Michael. It says credit card interest of up to 30% when you are neck deep in debt versus investment of like yeah, exactly. So investing first is gaining $100 but paying 300 exactly. No, it's not an opinion, it's just straight up math. Okay, so that's why you have to check out what works for you, right? You have to do your own analysis and your own calculation. Okay, so if you decide to do both, I've already touched on most of these points, when I was talking about the two of them. If time is not on your side, for example, you're someone that's, upwards there, let's say over 60, for example, it might make more sense to do both because it ensures you're making progress on both fronts. Okay. But to a large extent, one of the best things you can do for yourself when you're entering your latter years is to not have any debt, because even if you don't have savings, at least nobody's taking your money in the form of payments. Think about that for a second. Let's say you make 5,000 a month, you're 65. If you have payments, all your money is going towards payments. But if you enter your 60s without any debt, okay, that 5,000 is yours to keep. Even if you don't have saving, at least every month your 5,000 is your own to spend. Okay? Something to think about. Um Michael could have spoken any language, but yes, though. But yes, though, it's very true. Yeah, making 100 and paying 300 out, it doesn't make any sense. Okay. Um, so let us go. Oh, like I mentioned, it requires, if you're doing both, it requires diligence and discipline to ensure you follow through. I said that in every single section because all this boils down to you actually following through. It might be wise to do both in cases where you have nothing saved for emergencies. Oh yeah, so in this case it might be wise to do both. For example, if there's a case where you have nothing saved for emergencies or upcoming life issues of life, okay, so it might be wise to do both if you have nothing saved for emergencies or upcoming issues of life. I used last week or the week before, I did an example of when we found out we were pregnant, and I knew I was going to go on maternity leave this year, so we stopped everything and started piling up savings. You understand? We stopped everything. Okay. So it might be wise to do both in that scenario. If you know life is coming at you, for example, you're 60, you have to retire in 5 years, you still have debt and you have nothing saved for retirement. To a lot, you understand. So you have to know where you are seated. Okay. But if this is not your case, then chances are you might, you can still decide to do one or the other. Okay. Given all the points, I hope I've been able to convince you and not to confuse you. But let us go to our what do you call it? Graphs. Okay. So we can see what I'm talking about here. So not last week. Let me share my screen. Give me chance, oh, to praise me. Oh. Okay. So we talked about the standard last week or 2 weeks ago, where you have on a typical budget, you have housing here. This is the standard recommendation. Okay. So this person is typical North American. This is what is recommended. You spend no more than, again, these are for some of these are maximums. Okay. You spend no more than 35% on housing. And again, that's because there's a whole lot of life left outside of housing. These are just the ratios that we've talked about before. For some, if you don't do giving because that's just not who you are, you can take that 10% and move it around, up your savings, for example, up your debt, up your lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. So let's look at someone that decides they want to focus on debt. So their housing is still at 35%, giving 10, lifestyle 10, and transportation 15. So you notice here that debt repayment is at 25%. So what we've done is we've adjusted. So this person has no savings. So we've taken the 10% that would have otherwise gone to savings and put it inside debt because this person is focusing on debt. Okay. If you wanted to be, this is typical, this is standard, this person still wants to maintain, lifestyle and blah blah blah. If so let's look at something that's a little more aggressive. Okay, so now, for example, uh, um we have some folks, for example, when it comes, let's say your transportation cost, okay, because you consider your car, because some people don't consider their car payments a debt. They think is an asset. I'm not laughing. They they don't consider their car payment a debt. They just think, it's part of life, it's leverage, it's this, is that. Okay. So those are the people in the previous slide. In this slide, this person says, okay, the car notes, the student loan, every single thing is considered debt and I want to focus on paying off debt. So your transportation cost is cut down to like, is because the bulk of it is your car payment. So you've moved it into the debt repayment column. So, and again, this person is not saving, okay? Assuming they have their emergency fund all set up. This person is putting at least 40% of their check towards debt repayment, okay? And this person is being aggressive for the next 1 to 3 years, such that they're like, I'm going to tackle everything and pay off this debt. And then what happens is this 40% is now free cash flow. Once they are done paying debt, they can now take that and start throwing it in towards, they can decide, okay, I'm going to put 20% towards savings or 30%, and the remaining 10 I'm going to up my lifestyle, you understand, or I'm going to up my giving, whatever that looks like. And if you notice in this case, I've reduced the housing to 30% because this person has decided to sacrifice. Maybe they've gotten a roommate to help with their housing costs. They rented out their basement, something to be able to help free up more cash flow that they can put towards debt. So let's look at someone who decides to invest. So in this case, because there's still debt, okay, this person's saving is also at 25%, okay, with the standard of 35% housing. So this is just standard, okay? This person has not done anything, no sacrifice, no nothing just yet, okay? You notice, okay, let me move on to the next one for a more aggressive, just because of time. So if we're looking at someone that decides to be more aggressive, because there's that debt section, you notice there's only a maximum they can put towards savings. Again, because you have to be servicing your debts, whether you decide to invest or not. Okay. So that's usually the biggest part of if you decide to invest instead of paying off debt, because there's still that debt servicing portion that must happen. Okay, there's a limit to how much you can put towards saving and investing anyways. Okay. um so if you decide to do both, let's say you decide to, okay, you're going to split it up. This is another scenario or potential that you could potentially use if you decide to do both. Again, this person has decided they're renting out their basement or they've gotten a roommate. Their transportation costs, they consider that as part of their debt repayment. They still keep their lifestyle pretty low. There's the giving section. Again, if you're not into giving, you can take that portion and split it between the two, making both 25%. Okay. So again, this is just an example of what you could potentially do in this scenario. So I'm going to stop share my screen, and then last but not least, talk about what I recommend. So you all know me here at Fixed Finance. I believe in the power of focus as much as possible. It's easier to be all in on one, you understand, because you're focusing on all that, than what do you call it, and then afterwards switch to whichever one. So whichever one you choose, my own is focus. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. Whichever one you decide, whether it's investing or paying off debt or whatnot, make sure you focus and make sure you actually follow through. Again, if you're doing the debt, if you decide to go with the path of paying off debt first, because it's such a short period of time, in the sense of 3 years, when I say short, like relatively short, 3 years or less, okay, as much as possible, make sure you focus, get it done within that time frame, and then switch gears towards rushing aggressively on the investment side. Depending on your age, if after 3 years you're still not done with the debt, it might make sense to switch to both. Okay. So ensure you are serious, you take action, whichever path you choose. Don't mess around and do nothing for years. You understand? You sit down and before you know it, 5 years has passed and you've still not done either of the two. And you're still just, going around in circles. So that's what we don't want. We want you to actually do something. If you're losing sleep over debt, like debt is causing you stress, I suggest you focus on paying off the debt. Okay. If you're losing sleep because you have no savings, then focus on that. Okay. If you're losing sleep because of both, then it might make sense to focus on both. So that's what I'm saying. Like, as much as possible, don't just do nothing. Okay. Anyways, I'll end it there, and we will move on just because of time. I've taken a little bit of extra time and go from there. So personally, what we did as a family was we focused on debt first, and we got it paid off in under 2 years. To God be the glory. And then we switched around and started focusing on savings. Okay. So in that regard, that's what worked for us, because the debt was taken up. Anytime we even saved money, for example, what will happen is life would happen and then we have to spend the savings anyways, because we forgot one payment, or we forgot one thing that was coming out, or we forgot this and the other thing. So we were not making any progress on the saving portion. So we said, okay, fine, let's focus on the debt portion, kill the debt, and then go from there. Okay. Thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time with us. We will see you in the next video next week. If you've been paying attention, I'm trying to post more videos to, share more stuff. So hopefully you guys are learning, and we'll go from there. Michael says, fix it to say you understand. Yes, now, because I want you to understand. So, all right. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless you. See you next week. Bye.